Hey man, sorry about that. I don't know what the heck happened. I think the Wi-Fi or something at the restaurant I'm driving by picked it up. I'm actually swinging by an In-N-Out burger.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you it seemed like your main argument is you cited Descartes, uh, that sort of like the Cartesian doubt stuff, about you becoming the final judge of revelation, basically by personal experience, right? So it's like, but the issue with that, I think, is just like calling something supernatural truth without a public revelation is just like, it's just, I think it's just like emotionalism that's like made to seem theological, because every cult leader and mystic in history can say, I can't fully explain it, but I know X or Y is true. And
agreed. That's why I don't.
Let me just finish this thought real quick, and then I'll let you go. Okay.
Go ahead.
You said if God told you to be Orthodox, that you would, and we would believe that He already has through His divine revelation. It came through the apostles and the fathers in 2,000 years of history. So if you just want like a private telegram from heaven about where the church is, we don't believe that's how that works. Now, some people do have miraculous dreams and experiences that make them Orthodox. That does happen, but we don't want to put God to the test in that sense. And regarding like your claim that no one knows anything with perfect certainty, but you're perfectly certain that experience is reality, that's self-refuting, because that Cartesian certainty doesn't get you out of that. And so I just think that epistemologically it's not very strong. That's my opinion. Feel free to respond, take as much time as you want.
So I was just going to say that the Cartesian certainty only, I think, deals with what I call rational certainty. I don't think you can have perfect rational certainty of anything. And so when I claim that someone knows something through a direct experience, as I said before, I would only say that they know that the experience happened. How we immediately, once you begin to interpret an experience that you've had, you're now engaging in the process of reason, right? It's the difference between the raw data and the analysis of the data itself. Okay. So what people would say is, okay, you might have had some kind of a personal experience, Jacob, but you're not reasoning about it correctly, and I think you're misinterpreting these emotional experiences that you've had for communication from God, something like that, right? Now, I would say that there's a certain side to which that's valid. That's why I don't believe in what I call a feelings alone epistemology, right? But I also don't doubt that God can reveal things to me and commune with me and help me to know what things are right, sort of supernaturally. And so what I'm saying is that there's this, again, it's sort of, that's why I say collective witness. You don't just rely on one witness. If you're just relying on feelings, that's wrong. If you're just relying on authority, like a sola scriptura person says, this is the authority of the Bible is it. I just believe it because the Bible says so. I think you're missing something there. You're not engaging the power of reasons to even check as to why you believe that the Bible is true, or the spiritual manifestations. My thing is, all of these things can witness to you what is true, and you have to utilize all of them, right? And when you use all of those things, that's your best approximation to what the truth is, because those are the faculties God gave you for that purpose.
Yeah. Okay. So just like one more point. I understand that you're saying that it's a multifaceted case, but I think that the central thing about Descartes is just that you really just can't have it both ways, because the moment you say we can't have rational certainty, you've made a rationally certain statement about certainty itself. So it's self-refuting and self-falsifies. So that's the issue. It's a performative contradiction in saying it, if that makes sense. And then the other issue I see, like practically, I think it's a little bit absurd because if reason can't give you certainty, then you can't be certain about Descartes, Joseph Smith, or your own logic in saying that. So the whole conversation collapses into guessing. And so I don't think that makes sense. And since orthodoxy doesn't really rely in any way on Cartesian certainty, it rests in historical revelation. God became man, right? And then he left a church and they confessed the same faith. That's not a guess, it's not like it's not a Cartesian analysis with the assumption that you can't rationally find truth. So I think the problem with what you're claiming is that you start mainly leading in with skepticism, and then it ultimately, I think, as a reductio, I think it reduces into subjectivity heavily. And so I think our position of starting with the person of Christ, which is what the Orthodox Church did, we start with his person. That's what Nicaea was, is we're figuring out who is Christ. And through the ecumenical councils, where we have the revelation once and for all delivered, and we're explaining that revelation and defining the boundaries of it. So I think that just makes more sense. So I just think the Cartesian thing, it eats its own tail, because if you say we can't have rational certainty, that's a rationally certain statement. And so it's already self-refuting and a performative contradiction. So that's my stance on your epistemology.
No, I wouldn't say that the Cartesian certainty, or I wouldn't say that it is I wouldn't say that it's a rational certainty that we don't have rational certainty. No. Sorry, I was talking to someone at the window. Okay, so because I think that Descartes could have been wrong, I'm in the...
You cut out there. I'm sorry. You cut out.
Sorry. I was just saying that Descartes could have been wrong in his analysis. Maybe we can have rational certainty, but I'm not convinced that we can. What I'm saying is all that we have is more, or is greater or lesser confidence about for certain ideas. Even your epistemological foundation, which you're saying is around the history and personhood of Christ, you don't have a perfect epistemological certainty that that's true. Jesus may have just been a Jewish preacher that had a lot of ideas, and you could be wrong. I don't think you're wrong. Like, I think Jesus was who the New Testament makes him out to be, but you can't claim perfect epistemic certainty around that proposition. It's just a presupposition that you said, as you said before, is your starting point, but you haven't justified that starting point.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm not claiming you need like a Cartesian infallible certainty. That's your claim. And you're starting out with the idea that you're absolutely certain that no one can be absolutely certain, which is self-defeating. That's a defeating claim. And then you go, okay, well, I'm not absolutely certain. I might be wrong. But so then it ends up reducing into just kind of a shrug, like, well, maybe I'm right that you can't be certain. And then based off of that, I think you can be certain when you have feelings, and it reduces, I think, into nonsense there.
No, I wouldn't say that's my position at all. My position is very clearly that you can't have perfect epistemic certainty on a rational level. I don't think that exists. And unless you were to demonstrate to me how one can have perfect rational certainty, then that claim would fall apart. And I don't think you or anyone can do that. And I've tried to find a system to do that, because it'd be really cool if I found some sort of a methodology that could render perfect rational certainty. But I think Descartes' great sort of assertion still stands in the sense that no one has been able to refute it. So until he could be wrong, but I don't have a perfect epistemic certainty on a rational level. However, I can say that I've had certain experiences, and I can say that with certainty. Now, maybe I'm misinterpreting those experiences, but this is what Descartes did say we could know, and I think he was brilliant about it. I think, therefore I am. In other words, the direct experience of existence itself is like, it's as real as things get. It is reality. Just, you're directly encountering reality. Now, you may use your power of reason inappropriately and misinterpret what that is, but the baseline experience is, and this is what I actually argue in my series, I actually think that that knowledge, what knowledge is fundamentally, it is direct experience. It isn't something we can talk about it. We use words, we use reason to try and articulate the experiences, the encounters with reality that we have. But ultimately, the only thing that is fundamentally that you can know what it means to know something is to encounter something directly, not
Okay. So
articulation.
okay, here's the thing. So your claim is that you say perfect epistemic certainty doesn't exist, but that statement itself assumes certainty about that fact, and then you go,
No,
"Well, I'm not certain about that fact," which makes your claim
claim. Hold on, real
which
quick.
weakens the
I don't
claim.
want it to be misrepresented. I'm not. It is not that I'm certain about that fact. It is that that fact seems most likely true amongst the alternatives. There is no rational fact that I'm going to state that is perfectly epistemically certain. It is simply what I believe is the most likely thing, and I'm willing to be convinced otherwise if someone can show me good reason to doubt that claim.
Okay, so let me try to steelman you so that way I can 100% say what you're saying and we're not talking past, okay? And then I'll try to explain what my issue is, all right?
Okay.
So you're probably sure that certain probability doesn't, or not probability, you're probably sure that certainty is not true. That's your claim?
My claim is I think it is most likely that you cannot have perfect rational certainty about almost anything. And I guess maybe I should phrase it that way because, let's just leave.
My issue is you really can't claim probability here without presupposing or assuming certainty somewhere else. So otherwise the probability itself just reduces to meaninglessness.
Things are true by virtue of the terms being used. You know what I mean? Like 2 + 2 = 4 is true 100% just by virtue of the terms being used.
Okay, so you're saying like there's certain things that are just self-evidently true. Might be more of a divide.
Say like a square has 4 sides. That statement is true, but it's true. This is the difference between inductive and deductive logic. Deductive logic, something is true because of that's what a square is. We've defined the square as the thing that has 4 sides. So to say that a square has 4 sides is just to state what we have defined. However, if I say that this steering wheel in front of me is real, that statement, that is based on me trusting that my eyeballs are not playing a trick on me right now, and that I'm not actually dreaming and living in the matrix. This is sort of what Descartes was saying. He's saying in this realm of inductive logic, where we have to trust other things like our senses, you can't have
Here's the issue. Let's not. I'm not claiming perfect absolute epistemic certainty in the and I do understand that like the transcendent that is experienced is extremely compelling, and I agree. So let's establish some like shared ground. But why do I think your epistemology is shaky? It's because I think if you appeal to mathematical certainty or the shape of the square or whatever to justify probability as your standard, the whole point of math is that it's certain. So you admit at least one domain of absolute certainty in that claim, even if you say, well, I mean, it's just the best tools we have, but you're still making a positive claim. So you just have to keep shrinking the size of your claim when pressed on this, which I think ends up working against your thesis here altogether.
Well, I'd be curious to hear what, do you believe in perfect epistemic certainty?
Perfect epistemic certainty? Like in the sense of like...
Fundamentally what my claim is that you can't have perfect epistemic rational certainty about anything. And so all you can do is have better or worse reasons for higher or lower levels of confidence. That's the essence of my epistemological structure. So I just want to know fundamentally, I mean, there's only 2 things. You either can have perfect epistemic certainty about something, or you can't. The only thing that I would say that I've ever found that you can, I think, make that sort of a claim is your own existence. I think Descartes is right when he says, I think, therefore I am. And so the only thing that is perfectly certain is that you actually are having experiences. But that's as far as it goes. You can't make any perfect epistemically certain statements about those experiences. And so, again, fundamentally, if you disagree with me, you'd have to show that there is something that we have perfect epistemic certainty of outside of just our own existence. Can you do that?
Well, I think there's a lot smuggled into the entirety of your system here. It's not just that it's not just the skepticism employed by Descartes that where Descartes makes the claim that you really can't have any like epistemic certainty about anything, and you can't have absolutely certain truth claims. But Orthodox Christianity does not teach perfect epistemic certainty in the Cartesian sense at all. But Orthodoxy does affirm that there is real, trustworthy, and unshakable knowledge of God that is possible, not through abstract reason, but through participation in God's uncreated energies. And I think your paradigm, you shift that.
Can you know something if it isn't 100% certain?
Yeah, so I don't think that I think I misunderstood what your original position was, and now that I understand your position better, I think I'm understanding better what you're saying. At first, what I thought you were claiming is epistemic nihilism, that you can't really know anything for certain at all, and therefore you should just trust experience. You then bear it out better what your position was, so now I have to engage your position, not the position I thought you were making.
And and here's one of the things we have to define right up front. What do you mean by knowledge?
Knowledge?
Like, what does it mean to know something?
I guess I think maybe the main difference between me and you, I mean, knowledge means to know something, and like facts, like, and the patristic definition, the fathers describe knowledge as the illumination of the nous. So, which comes from synergy with divine grace, and that's how you. I mean, I guess there's different types of knowledge too, like conceptual, which should be like more analytical, and then like experiential knowledge and spiritual knowledge. These are different realms in the same domain.
Yeah. So, but when we're talking about knowledge, like, this is the first thing you have to do when you're doing epistemology. What does it mean to say that I know something?
I think my issue with your claim, with your epistemology, is I think methodology wise, I think it's a little bit hard to follow because the claims are so small. So it's like you can't really know anything for sure. It's like a very minimalistic case. You can't really know anything for sure, and you can know that with very high reasonable certainty. And so due to this skepticism of not really being able to know things for sure, you can trust the burning of your bosom when you pray, and then that gets you to LDS, and that's what you're trusting. And that just doesn't, from the outside looking in, that's kind of shaky. I'm not trying to be mean or anything.
I'm not, but that's not my case. When I'm talking about epistemology, I haven't gotten anywhere to a Mormon epistemology, as it were. I just want to talk about epistemology straight up. And epistemologically, just straight up at the foundations, the very first thing we have to do is understand what we say when we say we know something. So if you're going to say that you know things, are you saying that you have perfect epistemic certainty about those things?
You're making a truth claim, and you're claiming that what you're saying is true whenever you make a positive claim of anything. But I think even if we reduce it into like a more radical skepticism, like sort of the approach you're taking, I think it just sort of distracts from what our ultimate disagreement is on, which is LDS epistemology, not like the very fabric of how do you know anything at all whatsoever ever. Which that does play into the conversation. I can see that, but it does.
I'm willing to abandon LDS epistemology if I can show that there's a better epistemology. But I want to go back to the very, very beginnings of epistemology itself to figure out what the heck are we even talking about. Because
I believe. Okay, I'll let you keep going. Sorry.
What I find at the roots of epistemology is this, okay, and that is nobody by knowledge means they have perfect certainty. That isn't what knowledge is. Knowledge, when people claim knowledge, they're claiming a level of confidence. That's all they're claiming. It's the highest level of confidence you can do. So all we're dealing with in the epistemological space, when we're talking about what we know and what we don't know, is just things that we have more or worse reason for believing to be true. And so the only question then becomes, okay, well, what are you using to push something up the confidence scale? Like, if I see something, does that push it up the confidence scale that it's real? Yeah, I think that's a legitimate one. If I reason to something, if I look at history and I reason about the nature of the events involved and all that kind of stuff, does that increase my confidence that some historical claim is true? Yes, it does. So reason is another. My entire model is based on what I've kind of summarized into 5 witnesses that people use to increase their confidence that something is true. Okay? And so that's my epistemological model. It says, look, I have 5 witnesses that I roughly speak about that are intuition, reason, empirical sort of direct experience, moral outcomes or fruits, and authority. Those are the 5 witnesses that I believe that you can sort of lean into, and it depends on what you're dealing with. If I'm dealing with is this steering wheel in front of me? What is going to be the witness that's the strongest to give me good confidence that it's here? Well, my eyeballs. Why? Because my eyeballs are infallible? No, it's because they're reliable. And so I have an entire epistemological model that's based around the full use of these different 5 witnesses to engage those 5 witnesses anytime you're trying to understand the truth of a given truth claim, right? And I think that's a very reasonable model.
Do you believe that, like, truth is a person? Like, do you agree with the statement that truth is Christ? Do you believe in that statement?
I don't know what people mean by that statement.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no, I it's always interesting to see how far apart the worldviews are when comparing them, because there's so much talking past and, like, trying to understand your epistemology and your religion. I mean, because, like, for me, it's
but
just
I have
like,
to understand what the terms are. Like if you say, is Jesus the truth? Well, what do you mean by truth?
Like truth incarnate, like he is truth.
Okay, but what do you mean by truth? When I talk about truth, I mean that which pertains to reality. So is Jesus that which?
Like Jesus Christ is like real. Like he is like the ultimate reality is orthodoxy in our view. So okay, let's talk.
But Jesus was a person who was walking around in Palestine 2,000 years ago, who had flesh and blood and was hanging out with people. Like I don't know what it means to say that person is ultimate reality, without really fleshing that out. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. So, well, let's talk a little bit more because I'm trying to understand fully what you're saying here. Because, like, I have no idea. Like, I'm trying to understand what you even believe about Jesus in the first place. Like, because when I say Jesus is the ultimate reality, I mean, like, the very act of being, existence itself, flows from Jesus Christ. And that everything that exists participates in Christ. And that without him, nothing would exist. And I believe that's an ontological reality of Christ. Like, all things were made through him, and without him, nothing was made that was made. So he's not like the highest moral ideal or anything. He is being itself, which through whom being is possible. And I think that if
was Jesus a person?
Yes, but you're just going to confuse natures and persons because, like, I think the hypostatic union is rough for you. But if Jesus is not the ultimate reality, then ultimate reality is either impersonal matter or an unknown abstract principle. And part of what I have issues with your worldview is that God himself is not the first cause. He's just kind of organizing matter and data. He like organizes things together, but he's not eternal and uncreated. And so I think because God the Father was once a man who progressed to godhood, right? And then matter and intelligence have to be eternal because God was matter who became deity.
Well,
there's logical collapse because no being is self-existent and no one explains why, and there's no explanation of how any of it exists. And then you end up with eternal matter. Like matter is eternal, not God. You end up with
everything, including God, is eternal.
Yeah, so you just have but you have no first cause. There's no creator.
There's no need for. There's no need for a first cause in an eternal system.
There's no need for a first cause in an eternal system?
Yeah.
That's gotta think about what you're saying here, because it's like trying to make everything. I think it's a category error, because saying that an eternal system doesn't need a cause, like you're missing the point here. You're saying, okay, like there's been a long duration of things happening, but but it's dependent on something. What is that thing dependent on? Because eternity and time doesn't explain why there is anything at all. Because even if the universe has always existed, always, you still have to. No. Let me finish. You still have to explain why it exists rather than nothing. And an eternal system is contingent on something. So that means there needs to be a cause for its being. So you fall into a similar trap the atheists fall into, because like, I think there's a philosophical necessity here, because every finite thing within an eternal system still has a nature it didn't give itself. So the total system of contingent things, it isn't self-explanatory. And I think just declaring it as such, that's an assertion. But logically, what was the first cause of any of it? So,
well, this all presupposes that fundamental reality is finite.
Fundamental reality is finite? You believe fundamental reality is infinite?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So do you. If you believe that God is infinite, you believe that something is infinite and has no cause.
Yes, but you just think that. What do you think that infinite cause is? That's what I'm asking you.
It's just the nature of reality itself. Like to ask why there's something rather than
I feel like
nothing.
you're just kind of dodging, because if you call reality infinite, you're just changing the label now. It doesn't really answer my question. Is this infinite reality self-existent?
Yeah,
or is it just an infinite collection of things?
It's self-existent. All things fundamentally, whatever the fundamental like stuff of reality, it always has been. The nature of it is to exist, and it always has existed. To talk about nothing, to talk about non-existence, is in my mind, it's sort of an incoherence, because there is no such thing as nothing. There always has been something, and that something has been all that there is. And that's just a philosophical sort of thing. Because there is something, and from nothing comes, there always has been something. The only question is, what has it been? And what is its form? What is its shape? What is it like? And so you guys posit that God is that thing that has always been, and that he then out of nothing created more stuff. We just say no, that God and all of this stuff has always existed, and the only difference is how it's organized. Something like that.
So if matter is eternal and self-existent, what gives it rational order? Because there has to be a rational order to all of that.
Mind.
And so the mind, it's like that's God now. We're getting back to there being a God, an ultimate God. You're getting back to that.
Why not just that everything in reality is minded like a sort of idealism or panpsychism, and that from that and that amongst the, to use the LDS sort of terms, amongst the minds and mindedness of reality, there was a mind that began to organize things into into the universe and things as we experience.
I kind of think that the problem here is just the moment you affirm an eternal self-existent mind that rightly orders the universe, you've conceded the premise, which is that a necessary, intelligent, immaterial source of being created the world, and you're just like not calling it God.
No, I'm happy to call it God. I believe that God is the creator in that sense. But I'm not saying he created ex nihilo. I'm saying that he existed within a reality that was chaotic, and this is what the oldest biblical stories teach, and that from that he created order out of the chaos. And I do believe mind is necessary to create order. And I do believe that God is that mind that created order, but it doesn't mean that there has to be something that existed out of nothing. When you start positing nothing, that's the problem. There's no
the deity that you're describing isn't the source of all being. He's just like just sort of like crafts and organizes pre-existing chaos and rearranges it. that means he's not uncreated. He's part of the same system he's shaping, which means that you didn't escape my trap that I laid out earlier, which is that you've already, like, when you already concede a eternal mind organizing everything, that is God. You said, yes, that is God. But then you shifted it back to, oh, God just organizes the matter. I was saying that in your system, matter is eternal, and you just said, okay, yeah, all of these things are eternal out there, and you moved it away from God. But then when I pushed you on it, you then said it was God.
No, I'm not saying that God is matter.
Because you can call it an eternal mind if you like, but it's like Orthodoxy calls that the Logos, Christ, God.
Okay. And I don't have a problem saying that God is a creator. I have a problem saying that he created it out of nothing, because from nothing, nothing comes. It's the big problem I have is the presupposition of nothing. Like there is no such thing as nothing. And
so your view is that God did not create the world out of nothing, but rather from something, which gets us back to the pre-existing chaos or eternal matter, which you said is ordered and it's a mind that's running that, but it's not God. But it is God. But then you said it was God. Do you see what's metaphysically impossible here? Because if matter is external, and then it shares God's defining attribute, self-existence. So two self-existent realities can't coexist. Each would limit the other. So if God depends on matter to act, he is not omnipotent. And if matter depends on God, then God is no longer eternal. And all you have is eternal matter. Do you see what I'm saying?
I wouldn't say that. I would not say that God I would not say that God is how was I going to say? I just like drew a blank on what I was going to say. God is coexistent with eternal matter. And when I say eternal matter, this is the other thing that people get into trouble with. Okay. I'm not talking about the kind of matter that you and I experience. Okay. Latter-day Saints talk about like a spiritual matter, that there is some sort of a substance that has always existed. Okay. And the problem is that even Orthodox have to concede that. Because if God has always existed, right? Did God exist in any sort of a realm?
So but here's the thing, if you admit that...
Hold on though, because the problem is that you want to posit that God always existed, okay? But I don't know what the heck you mean to say that God has always existed if he didn't exist in some sort of a reality, the reality that he inhabited, which would mean that there is a reality that has always existed.
We believe
God is indistinguishable from that reality that has always existed. To say that he is that reality is just to be a pantheist, to say that God is everything. He is reality itself. But that is not what the scriptures teach. He's the creator, but he creates within an existing system a realm that he inhabits, the divine or eternal realm.
Okay, so here's how, and this is actually great because this really gets into Eastern Orthodoxy, because the misunderstanding here is that when I say God is reality itself, I'm not saying the world is God. I'm saying everything that truly exists receives its being from the one whose being is uncreated. So that's not pantheism.
Okay,
and so in pantheism, no, let me finish. You made a big claim. Let me finish it. In pantheism, God and the world share one essence. In Orthodoxy, there is a gulf between the uncreated essence of God and the created essence of everything else. And so we participate in God through his energies. That's the essence energy distinction. So that's how we resolve that conflict. But let me get back to what we're saying here, because the issue in your realm or in your paradigm is that you're saying that existence, right? You're saying that existence and matter are eternal. Is time itself eternal? I mean, there's just a lot here that I think, if you end up going this route, you've now like, is God and all of us transversing through an infinite timeline? Like, I'm just so confused. Like, is the timeline the ultimate thing? Like, what is the ultimate here?
Well, the problem is that the ultimate is the realm that even God inhabits. Okay.
So the ultimate isn't matter. The ultimate isn't any of those things. The ultimate is the realm that God inhabits.
When we talk about, one of the challenges with talking about matter is that we conflate the term and we think that what we mean by matter in LDS thought is like actual like atoms and stuff like that those are not emergent from something more fundamental.
Here's the thing.
But
Here's the
LDS,
thing.
real quick, just LDS believe that the physical matter that we live in emerges from a more fundamental, what we would call spirit matter, a more fundamental substance. Something akin to what an idealist would say when they say that actually mind is fundamental. Okay, well, let's call mind, let's call that spirit matter, right? You do this to the same term. The problem is that fundamentally God, if he has always existed, if he has an eternal existence, then he inhabits a realm that has always existed. And so there is no creation out of nothing unless God exists in some realm that has no properties to it.
Would you
Or
like
if
to,
God
would
is
you
that realm
concede,
itself.
would you concede just being a dualist? Because it seems like if there is a realm that God inhabits, then that realm is more fundamental than God, because God depends on that realm to exist or to act, which means the realm, not God, is ultimate.
Yes, I
So
would
it
say,
seems to me that you are a dualist, not monotheism at all.
I would say, well, monist and dualist doesn't have to do with monotheism.
Because the moment you put God inside something, you've turned him into a creature within a larger reality. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's the problem.
So
Is that
what is this realm
God,
exactly? Because if it exists independently, it shares God's supposed internality. It's two self-existent realities again,
well,
and that's dualism, dude.
I'll be quite clear. I do believe that there is a reality that is even more fundamental than God. Because if God was fundamental reality itself, then he's not a person. He is like a reality. And that is not consistent with Jesus. I get that a lot of the Greek philosophical sort of world, that's what they sort of arrived at to what God is. And I just think that's totally incoherent and inconsistent with what the Bible actually teaches. And I actually think it's bad philosophically. Because
if there's a reality that's more fundamental than God, then by definition that reality is God. The
No,
most fundamental reality is
no.
Let me finish. The most fundamental reality is what everything depends on. And even if your God depends on something else, he's not the ultimate. So I don't even really want to deal with him. I want to get to your ultimate. So you've demoted God to a creature living under a higher law. There's a higher cosmology above God that he's living in. You really can't escape that. And a being that's not the ground of reality can't be divine. You understand that? So if God exists inside reality, then he's just part of the furniture of the house that is the universe. That's what he is. He's not the foundation in any meaningful sense. So he's no longer, like the scriptures say, the I am at all. But he's just like, I am also. I'm just another guy. And that's just like, there's the metaphysical incoherence doesn't make sense, because the word fundamental means self-existent, necessary, and uncaused, right?
Well,
which is how we view God as self-existent, right? So the word God means exactly the same thing. You can't have a more fundamental than the fundamental, because God is the fundamental. That's like saying there's something more necessary than necessity itself. The ideal just self-destructs the moment you define it. That's the problem.
Well, I would say that no. The problem is that you're defining God as that which there no greater can be conceived. This is perfect being theology, which is the exact problem. That is not who God is in the Bible. God is a being, the creator within an existent reality. There is no creation ex nihilo. That's an incoherent notion. And so, yeah, if you want to define God, if your God is and I would say the ground of all being, because to a certain extent, it's the ground of all being is co-eternal with God and all of us. Like the radical claim of the theology of Mormonism is that everything is coexistent and eternal with God. Like that isn't the crazy thing. The crazy thing is that we have a being within reality who loves us, who wants us to progress and become as he is, and therefore has organized things within the reality that just exists and must exist necessarily so that we can progress and become like him. That is the whole plan. To say that God is fundamental reality itself is to reduce God from a father and a person to an abstraction that is partless, passionless, and of necessity can't have the kind of relationship with us that Jesus Christ actually talks about.
So you believe that, like,
is not consistent with what the scriptures actually teach.
We can get into the scriptures, but before we do that, Actually, I might need to get going pretty soon. I got a quiz I got to take.
No
But
worries.
let's talk about one more thing though, because you're saying that there is a grounding, right? There is a what'd you call it? A ground level of reality that's
Yeah,
co-eternal
let's
with
say
God.
the like fundamental reality, let's call it, that God exists within, that is co-eternal, that we all exist within and have always existed within. It just is. It's reality. And you're saying
So
that
here,
reality is God, and I'm saying
if
that
the ground of all being is co-eternal with all beings, right? Then it's not really the ground of anything, because to ground something means to give it existence. If everything is coexistent and co-eternal with God, then nothing is grounded. Therefore, everything is self-existent.
yes,
So you've
everything
erased
is.
causality and turned creation into a meaningless word. It just doesn't even really mean anything.
Is it meaningless if because I didn't make the paint out of nothing if I paint the Mona Lisa?
If everything is co-eternal and there's no distinction between necessary and contingent being, then every finite thing would somehow be necessary and infinite, which is just nonsense. You'd have like an infinite.
You assert
You'd
that.
have an infinite finitude or finiteness, an infinite finiteness, and a necessary contingency. It's a square circle. It does not make any sense, dude. So the God does not inhabit any reality. The God of Orthodoxy does not inhabit any reality or is coexistent alongside it.
I would
He calls
assume
it
that if he
into
doesn't
being from
inhabit,
nothing.
if he inhabits
His
no
being is not
reality, then he's
parallel to
not real.
ours. Ours is derivative from his. So when we say he's the ground of being, we mean he alone is uncaused, and that existence shares through his uncreated energies. So if everything is co-eternal with God, then absolutely nothing depends on him. He's no longer God.
Depends on him for what?
What do you think? What do you think God even is? Like, this is.
Well, that's my whole point, is that you guys have defined God as this ground of all being under the assumption that being needs to be grounded in something and isn't eternal.
Do you believe everything is created?
What do you mean by created? Out of nothing? No, I believe everything has always existed in some form or another. The only question is what? That's LDS 101 cosmology and theology.
Okay. So if you mean everything, then the act of creation and the conditions for existence are created, right?
Wait, what? Rephrase that.
I'm just so confused by what you're saying, to be honest. It doesn't make sense.
No,
Because is time eternal? Is time eternal too?
Yes.
Is the timeline eternal?
Yes.
If God and all of us are all of us and God just transversing an infinite timeline, then?
I would say yes. I tend to hold to an A theory of time, not a B theory of time.
So what's weird about this, what's incoherent to me, is it's logically impossible to transverse a timeline that goes eternally backwards. So God would never be able to drive at the present if the past goes back infinitely. We'd never be able to arrive at the present. How does that even make sense?
No, I don't think that follows at all. You can have an infinite timeline that it goes infinitely into the past. There's no reason, and I've never understood the arguments when people say that that's impossible.
Do you believe so you believe there was no start, no Big Bang, no nothing, no?
No,
nothing.
I think that the reality that we inhabit, like the Big Bang, is something like that is an act of creation that where our time space continuum that we experience is emergent from something else. I think we can say that based on the science and I think good reason. But I don't say that it didn't emerge from a more fundamental reality, which is what I would say is something like what we would describe as the eternal realm. And it is also possible in LDS theology, though I don't ascribe to this view for scriptural reasons, that there's an infinite regress of sort of families of gods or whatever it is, in sort of an infinite realms that are popping into or that are expanding ever outward in whatever the eternal realm is beyond the bubble that we live in.
Interesting. So do you believe...
Although like I said, I don't hold that position. I don't hold the infinite regress position. But I would say that one of the stronger cases for it is an infinite timeline into the past.
Is existence accidental and unintentional? Like, did it come by a purpose, or is it just something that happens to exist without reason?
It just is. It's. I would say that it is incoherent to even talk about non-existence because there's no such thing as non-existence. There's only different forms of existence.
Saying it just isn't an explanation. It's just a surrender of an explanation, to be honest.
Well,
it means I don't know why reality exists. I don't think there's a reason. That's not even metaphysics. That's just
No, it's a brute fact. It's a starting point. Everyone has to have a starting point. And to say that, well, I can either say that everything always has existed. I have to make that claim, or you have to claim that out of nothing came something. And you don't make that claim, by the way. You claim that God always existed. So therefore, both of us are positing an infinite, something that is infinite. And
so here's the issue here.
Neither of us are positing that there ever was a time when there truly was nothing. And so you also have to describe why it's out of bounds to say that fundamental reality has always existed. You can say,
So
oh, that
here's
can't
the thing.
be, but
Here's
then you
the
say
thing.
that God always existed.
Here's the thing.
What?
Here's the thing. If existence is accidental, then there's no telos. There's no telos. I don't know how to pronounce that Greek word. There's no ordering, which means that it's chaos.
You're right.
So it
And
collapses on itself.
And that's exactly what the Bible teaches, that there was chaos, and then within the chaos, God creates the order. So it fits perfect scripturally.
So your position is that there was chaos first, and then inside the chaos, a God appeared or acted to create order?
That is actually a tougher question as to why it is that, and I think this may lend credit to the B theory of time, is that, okay, God was within this sort of order eternally, and then at some point within that timeline, he decided to begin creation, meaning organization and creating order out of the chaos. One of the great mysteries I think that every faith has to deal with is sort of like, well, if there exists, why does creation begin to happen at some point in an eternal timeline?
Okay, so we pushed this back far enough, past matter, past all that, and it seems like an atheist, you go all the way back to chaos. Don't worry, I'm not calling you an atheist. Just give me a second.
You're fine.
But like you would say, like there's chaos, and then there's organization that comes out. So my question would just be, how can a chaotic being with no telos, no ordering, bring together order and intentionality without that telos? Because it seems that forgive my mispronunciation of that word, but it seems like your position is that there was chaos first. And so that means that chaos precedes God, and chaos is the true eternal principle. How did God go in there and correct that principle? Because it seems like he would just be finite, struggling against a co-eternal disorder. So it doesn't make that much sense to me. How can a chaotic being with no telos bring order and intentionality? Because, like you said, existence is accidental.
I would think inherent in the nature of God and in the nature of mind is a desire for, creating order in the chaotic environment that they're in. And God was the greatest. And God
He's within the system. He's within the cosmological structure that you made.
Right.
He's within that system of complete chaos.
I wouldn't say that order is. I would describe it something more like light and darkness, good and evil, and
nature assumes telos, which you denied earlier. That's the issue. Do you not see that? Because God's within a system. So if existence is accidental and there is no telos, and chaos is the grounding principle, how can a chaotic being within telos bring order and intentionality? The answer is dualism. You're a dualist.
I would not say
you're a dualist. That's what you are. There's no amount of sophistry that can get you out of that. Because when you say inherent to the nature of God,
what do you mean by a dualist?
When you say inherent to the nature of God is a desire for order, you're picturing a God who finds himself in disorder and wishes to fix it. That means order exists as an ideal outside of him, which he tries to achieve. A being who desires order isn't the source of order. He's basically subordinated to the system. And metaphysically, the problem is, if order is something distinct from God that he strives towards, then order is higher than God. You introduced a law above the lawgiver of Scripture, an ideal above the divine. And you're a dualist because you believe good and evil has to exist necessarily. There's chaos and a God must correct it. That's incoherent. That's incoherent because either God is the principle of order or he is not God. And the issue is that desire.
I agree it's incoherent.
Desire. I'm going to finish what I'm saying and then I'll let you talk. Desire implies lack. A being who desires order lacks the very perfection he's supposed to embody. So in Orthodox theology, God does not desire order. His being is order.
No, but
so he doesn't look at chaos and go, oh man, damn, look at all this freaking chaos. This shit's crazy. Let me fix that like Mormon God. He's real God. He doesn't have to do that.
Yeah, okay. There's a big misunderstanding going on here. Okay. I do not define God as that of which no greater can be conceived, because that does rightfully lead to where ultimate reality and its nature are what is ultimate. Okay, that's it. So if you want
No,
to
I
go,
get that. I get
like,
that you don't define them that way.
I'm
The
not
problem
defining.
is
No. I'm defining God as the greatest being, as in like a person.
I
Okay,
understand that.
he's the
What you're saying
greatest.
is you have
He's
what
the
you're telling me
greatest.
is you have two
He's
eternal realities: chaos, uncreated disorder, and out of the chaos emerges God, who's an organizer,
No, I did
and
not
the two
say. I
infinites.
don't believe that. Hold on, let's go back.
Oh, he's eternal along with all
Hold
the other
on,
matter. I
let's
get
not
that.
straw man. Let's make sure you're engaging with what I actually believe. I do not believe that the fundamental nature of things is mere chaos. I believe it is. It's like I said, like light and darkness, chaos, order and disorder. That those are the nature of inherent reality itself, and within that reality itself are minds. And God is the mind that, in that fundamental reality of light and darkness, chose the light and has always chosen the light, and wants us to choose the light with him, so that we can take the order and chaos that are kind of meshed together. If you read 2 Nephi 2, it talks about this. And he wants us to use our agency, which is part of our nature as agents or intelligences, as we would talk about them in LDS thought, to progress and to create more order, more light, and to work within this dualistic reality of light and darkness to bring about, the kingdom of God, the highest and best, all of that kind of stuff. And so we have entities here that you have conflated, and this is where I just fundamentally, like, you can say, well, that's not God, that's not what you mean by God. Well, great. I don't worship reality itself. I worship my Father in heaven, who is within that reality and teaching me and all of us and empowering us to be able to bring about the kingdom of God, the light out of the darkness, chaos order out of the chaos, to be co-creators with him in sort of painting the tapestry of this canvas of reality into something beautiful.
So as you said, you said it's not chaos, it's light and darkness. And I think that kind of sounds more refined, but I think it gets your system deeper into contradiction, because it just shows that it's eternal dualism. Because what you're saying is, look, from these two principles, light and darkness, those are the two principles that reality is grounded on. That's not creation, that's dualism. And dualism can not explain unity, because if light and darkness are equally ultimate, there's no reason one should triumph over the other. You get that? And so then if you say, look,
You're right.
light and darkness are both,
we can make it triumph over the other.
if light and darkness are both eternal, you've divided being into two uncreated substances that eternally oppose each other. And also, you've now kind of given evil an ontology, too. It has a positive existence in LDS. There's a lot of issues in that. And a God who shares eternity with darkness is not omnipotent. He's entirely dependent on these definitions, these Platonic ideals you have that are floating out there.
I reject that God is omnipotent in a radical sense, like the.
So where does order come from, though? Where does order come from?
Where does order come from?
Because the light exists, because you said there's light and darkness that exists in this matrix. The light is obviously independent of God. So where does the light come from? Where does this light come from?
I would say something along the lines of them being undifferentiated, and that we're the ones who separate the light from the darkness.
So when you say that there's a mixture of chaos and order that grounds reality, how can you have a whole with chaos? So it does end up being dualism. Do you just concede you're a dualist?
I'm not sure why. Like when you say
because here's the thing: if darkness and light are fundamental to reality, then darkness cannot be overcome. That's a contradiction. So no real distinction now.
It can be. It can be differentiated. It can be separated from each other, and that we can very much. And this is what I think. This is a good. And some of this getting into areas that obviously are not part of like official LDS thought and stuff. These are obviously my own sort of philosophical takes on it. But it's a separation between the light and the darkness that creates a realm of light that people can inhabit. And that is one of the great things that's going on within the great cosmic drama, is he's separating the sheep from the goat, the light from the darkness. And the children of the light will be gathered together, and the darkness will be expelled. It's the great differentiation. And the only question is where do we want to be in the great cosmic order that's emerging?
So if you're saying good and evil can be separated from each other, that means they're like two independent substances, which I think would mean that evil has a real eternal being of its own. Would you agree with that?
I'm open to that. I don't know that I would stake my claim on that, but I would say I would tend to say yes, that I would tend to believe, at least right now, and some of this is just even in my own mind is very much still formulating, the idea of there being a fundamental substance that is divisible, that is good and evil sort of like wrapped into one, but it doesn't really have any power until it's divided, right? And the great work of creation is actually the distinction of things into good and evil, the breaking apart. Have you ever heard of mereological nihilism?
Because if darkness doesn't exist, then reality doesn't exist in your paradigm, because you already said that darkness and light were fundamental to your paradigm. So I'm just going to say one more thing, and then we can wrap it up. You can say whatever you want to your audience. It just seems like dualism means that there's like you have two ultimate principles that you've given me: one evil, light and darkness, right? Each eternal and self-existent, locked in eternal opposition to each other, and they're defined by their differences to each other. Because if good and evil are both absolute, then each is partly ungood and unevil, because each depends on the other to define itself. So you can't know light without darkness or good without evil. So neither is self-explanatory. And so the moment they're defined by contrast, they stop being ultimate. You understand that? So the contradiction is that if evil has its own being, it either causes itself or receives being from something else. If it causes itself, right?
Nothing causes itself. Everything is ultimately self-existent. And that, again, there's sort of this assumption that is causing the disconnect.
I think this just ends up collapsing into absurdity. I've had a great time. I got to take this quiz, man.
Hey, no worries. Good chatting, man.
All right, take it easy.
Okay, bye-bye. All right.